Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We have made it. It is the day. E Day. E Day. Which, all my Gears people will know. E Day. But I was actually thinking about that E Day. For those not familiar with the Gears of War game franchise, it was kind of like an event where this human civilization came under attack by some creatures that were actually living under the earth that just kind of popped out and said, you guys have been fighting long enough. Now we're going to get rid of all of you. It's kind of somewhat apropos if that were to happen right now. I was laughing. I was thinking about it. And I was just like, man, I don't even know even if something as outlandish, because obviously that couldn't happen, right? Obviously that's not going to happen. But even if something as outlandish as that happened right now, I have very little confidence that we would be able to come together to fight some kind of existential threat of some kind of subterranean species that just decided to pop out and wipe us all out. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, it is E Day. It is Election Day. And yeah, man, we will see what goes on today, man. It's going to be very interesting. But hopefully, because I'm looking at these news articles in Washington, D.C. It looks like a goddamn war zone right now. And obviously the riots in Philly and all these other places. And we'll see what happens, man. I feel like it is a very ominous day. And I guess you could say that about most election days. But this one just always feels like, I don't know. And again, maybe it's become something of a platitude to say that this election's so important, but it really does feel like this is a big one. This is a really big one because we haven't seen a lot of the alarming things that are taking place in America right now. We haven't seen, at least I haven't seen in my lifetime. I haven't seen widespread riots and looting and all of this. I haven't seen the reinstitution of segregation. I haven't seen, I haven't seen censorship of the magnitude that we're seeing of credible news outlets like the New York Post, like the White House press secretary, or what was it? The White House. It was something. Someone affiliated with the White House. May not have been a press secretary, but a lot of big things, going on, man. And we'll see what the pulse of America is today. I'm optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I think that well, at least I'm hoping that there are enough people who have been paying attention, or at least been made aware of the stakes, that they will vote accordingly. But we will see. And regardless if the president takes it or not, I think it's interesting. The people, like, going back to that horseshit monologue that Bill Maher said, right? One point that he brought up that I didn't address in the other episode that I really should have. But he said, it's about something about we're not. He was breaking down he was making a play on the term civil war, where he said we, obviously being leftists, aren't good at making war, and they aren't good at being civil. And really, the only reason, the irony of that statement, besides the fact that it displays how far his head is up his own ass, the irony of that statement is the only reason we're not in civil war is because the Trump side has been civil. And I wonder, because there's a limit to everything. And I just wonder what lies ahead in the event that he does not win the election today. Because it's crazy, man. I feel like, I talked to some people, whether at work or talked to a couple people at the gym, and people are questioning, At least the people I've talked to, and I see it on Twitter and other various media outlets. But people are kind of questioning whether or not the winner of this election is actually going to be the winner. It's very it's it's really disheartening that we're at the point now where we're questioning the validity of our own election. But I think that's been the game plan. It really is amazing that we find ourselves in a position where we're actually having people are having rational discussions about the prospects of armed conflict in America, within the American borders, between American citizens, no less. So, but it's not surprising because our media outlets, our politicians have been doing a good job of sowing seeds of division and eroding away the American consciousness. And, that's one of the things that kind of kept us together. I kind of talked about it in a previous episode. I'm not going to go all the way back through it again. But for a nation like America that is not a homogenous nation ethnically, it's more imperative for us to believe in something that unites us. And that used to be, the American spirit, the American way of life, American ideals. But as those things have been eroded, specifically by the left, the only thing that's left are the things that divide us. So, we're kind of a product of our own undoing, so to speak. But we'll see how it goes today. And, for me personally, obviously, I'm pulling for the Don. I will be punching my ticket for the Don here within the next couple of hours. I'm trying to get to that poll early and then hit the gym after that. But if for some reason he's not victorious, and I think this is something that kind of separates the people on this side from the people on the other side for the most part, right? Because obviously there are people on the other side that are not as radical as what we're seeing in the news. But I think one of the things that separates us is that, if we lose, okay, and life goes on. And then we just kind of go into damage mode, and it's like, okay, well, here we go, brace for impact. And but I don't anticipate any widespread riots. Like, DC's boarded up right now, right? You have all these cities enacting martial law right now, right? Well, it's not because of Trump supporters. So, that whole Bill Maher horse shit about, but that's the game you have to play with the left because they're so irrational. They're at the point now where they can't take criticism. So in order to kind of criticize them, you have to say, like, have you ever tried to talk to one of your friends about how bogus CNN is? And one of the first things that you usually find yourself saying, or one of the first reactions that they have is, well, there's bias on both sides. Yes and no. Yes and no. Is there bias on both sides? That's debatable. I mean, Fox does have when I'm talking about bias, I guess I would talk about bias in the place of actual facts, right? Now, does Fox have a slant? Yes. CNN has a slant as well. That's negligible. I'm talking about intentionally misrepresenting information to suit that bias. That's what I'm talking about. So, but they've just become so irrational. At least the loudest voices over there have become so irrational that they can't even take criticism at this point. And I really think most of it stems all the way back to parenting. I really do. Like these were the kids that threw the temper tantrum in the store because they wanted the candy bar and their parents gave them the candy bar. I would love to see some kind of study done on that because I think there's a connection there. Now, there was a connection that I saw. This was some months back, actually, that I think it was Tim Pool. It might have been somebody else, but they did it was like some kind of study that they were talking about that showed that there is an overwhelming proportion of people on the left that have mental/emotional disorders. And that's not even me, that's not even me dissing. I'm being serious about that. I'll have to try to find that. I'll have to try to find that, and if I can find that, I'll post that at a later date. But anyway, it's we'll see what happens, man. We'll see what happens. Like I said, I just hope that whatever happens, it's number one, it's legit. Number two, there's balm in Gilead, if you will, that there's a peaceful transition or a peaceful continuation. But I have not seen much to give me hope in the way of that. And I tell you what, man, if somebody was writing this as like a novel, it's like 50 something degrees in Florida right now, which, it is getting close to winter, but it's usually still pretty much in the 60s and 70s down here at this point. But it's a little chilly out, and it's a very quiet. It's been very quiet these past couple days. It's just I don't know. I think everybody's kind of collectively holding their breath. But yeah, man, I hope people get out there and vote and do their thing. Or, if you're not voting, I hope it's because that's what you chose not to do. Not because you're just, someone who's just apathetic or lazy or don't, whatever. I We'll see what happens. But I'll tell you, one of the things that I have my eye on for this election is not actually even taking place in Florida where I live. It's actually taking place in California. And it is, let me see, let me pull this up real quick. It is California Proposition 16. And that is to repeal Proposition 209. I hate how convoluted this verbiage is. Like it's always like, okay, see this, now see this, now see this equals this. It's a very obscure way of speaking, but I get it. It's got to be precise, I suppose, in the way of the legal mumbo jumbo. But I really want to talk to you about one of the left's more infamous tactics, and that is like they have a knack for framing things a certain way with the words they use. Like I've talked about their war on words and how they like to kind of change definitions to sow confusion and all this other stuff. But another aspect of their word I can't say the word, their word games, it's like war games, their word games, is the way they kind of frame things. I'll give you an example. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So the party of the left is the Democrat Party, but a lot of people call it the Democratic Party. It's actually called the Democrat Party, but that's done intentionally. They even call themselves a Democratic Party. The implication there is that party is pro-democracy. So if you're called the Democrat Party, the Democratic Party, the implication is the party that opposes you is what? Opposed to democracy. And you could say that's a reach, but I've got a few others for you. Once maybe a coincidence. What do you say to 2, 3, 4, or 5? The new subsect of the left that is in Joe Biden's ear are called the progressives. Now, granted, the Progressive Party is not new. It's really just a retread of a bunch of liberal racists from back in the early 1900s that were pro-eugenics and a bunch of other nasty things. But the fact that you call yourself the Progressive Party, again, what's the implication of that? That you are the party for progress. So if people want progress, who doesn't want progress? Well, then we're the party for you, because that's what we're about. And again, the antithesis of this would be the opposition is the party that's not for progress. And that's just not true. I think what the left has done a good job of doing is conflating progress and change. Not all change is progress. You know, um, progress does require change, but not all change is progress. You know, if a ballot was passed or a bill was passed that said, hey, women can no longer vote. Well, that's a change, right? Because right now women can vote. And so that would be a change, but that would not be considered progress. Uh, no. That would not be considered progress. So it would be considered regressive. It would be regressive change. But one of the things they've done a good job of doing is conflating those two things in people's minds. So when they propose all these radical new ideas and you hear it coming from the progressive party, people who don't know better automatically associate this change with, okay, this must be some kind of progress. And it's just not the case with a lot of the things that they are proposing. Another one, how about Black Lives Matter? One of the more famous ones, right? Black Lives Matter was pretty popular this summer. I think most of mainstream America, maybe, the heartland, were very unfamiliar with it until the whole George Floyd thing, and then it kind of kicked off and all this. Well, for people who are already kind of familiar with it, such as myself, no, I've always been opposed to it because, again, as addressed previously, I just have a skeptic. You can call it a skepticism, a cynicism. But whenever I hear black, Negro, African American, anything in an organization, my antennas go up. Because 9 times out of 10, it's a Democrat hustle. And, that's only been proven to be true verifiably. I can't think of one situation where that's been wrong. Maybe the United Negro College Fund. Maybe I'd have to look into that more. But off the top of my head, I can't think of any other thing in terms of a political apparatus. So Black Lives Matter. Again, framing. You hear that and you say, oh, well, okay, yeah, sure, I'm not. Because again, the implication is if you oppose this, then you're saying Black lives don't matter, which is not true. That's the other thing that they kind of pair with their framing is the fallacy of the false choice, right? Or a false dilemma, I should say, where it's either this or that. It's either this or that. There is no in between. No, well, there is. They kind of coerce your opinion into one of two predetermined outcomes that match, obviously, the agenda they're trying to push. So, Black Lives Matter. And again, framing, right? Because while we were having the Black Lives Matter protests and all over the country, a police officer named David Dorn, he got killed protecting a friend's shop during the rioting and looting. A black police officer, no one cared. So, and again, it's just not him. You could talk about all the children that die from catching stray bullets. You can talk about all the people who die from gang violence. You can talk about all of this, but they don't care, right? There's no press in that. There's no money in that. So, another, perhaps one that not a lot of people are familiar with that you should become familiar with is this notion called the Great Reset. And the Great Reset, let me pull this up. This is very interesting. So I'm at their website. And the Great Reset is basically, from what I can tell, one of the things, another tactic that they use is it's a very, you don't really know what you're getting. It's all just kind of a bunch of things that sound good, but you don't really understand what it is that you're getting. So, the Great Reset. I'm on their website, greatreset.com. I will include the link in the description box. What is the Great Reset? The Great Reset is a creative industry movement to embed the positive environmental shifts that have happened during lockdown as the new normal. Our industry has power and influence, but we need lots of people to choose to use it. We grab this opportunity to help shape a society that puts mankind and our planet's needs first. To do this, we need to, one, reset ourselves to become agents of change, not just passive receivers of briefs. Two, reset our work so we can create, reset our work so what we create promotes sustainable values, attitudes, and behaviors. And three, reset our impact by reevaluating what we measure and celebrate as success. So, the Great Reset, again, from that, it doesn't really answer what the Great Reset is. It really is just kind of tilling the soil and saying, just be ready to accept what is to come. We can go. I'll probably have to do one specifically on this. I really just wanted to mention it in name to show you, again, framing the Great Reset. Well, this doesn't sound like a reset per se. This sounds like a great programming. This sounds like mass brainwashing. So let's see. Why do we need to reset? Here we go. A false dilemma. The pause during lockdown created by the pandemic will result in a 7% decrease in global emissions in 2020. The UN states that we need a decrease of 7.6 every year until 2030 to avoid climate and ecological disaster. This is untrue. This means we need to maintain the same decrease every year if we were living in as if we were living in lockdown. Okay? The challenge is that as we emerge from the pandemic, the pressure to go back to, quote, business as usual will intensify. No kidding, people want to get back to their lives. But people don't want to go back. Again, what people? Only 23% of the UK believe following the lockdown, advertising should encourage people to consume, shop, and fly like before lockdown. 23% of the UK public. Okay, well, and again, this is kind of how the information game is played. The UK public is very, very vague, right? If I get a bunch of people, I can ask a bunch of lay people, but I could also float in a bunch of people who are supporting my agenda. This is a very vague term. 23% of the UK public. 77% believe it is the industry's responsibility to encourage people to behave more sustainably, like during lockdown. That's a very alarming statement. 77% believe it is the industry's responsibility to encourage people to behave more sustainably. Encourage. How are you going to do that? How are they encouraging you to behave during lockdown? They're locking you down, telling you can't go anywhere. So, yeah, I'll have to do an episode on the Great Reset. But the Great Reset sounds like mass programming to me. Sounds like mass brainwashing. But again, a framing tactic. But getting back to the initial point that I was making about one particular piece of legislation that I will be paying attention to, that is the California Proposition 16, repeal Proposition 209. It is called the Affirmative Action Amendment. More framing. The Affirmative Action Amendment, okay, well, if I'm a person on that side of the aisle that believes affirmative action is a good thing, I do not, by the way, but if I'm one of those people who believes that it's in its merits, then obviously I'm going to support this. But for all of us forward-thinking people, we would say, well, wait a minute. Okay, the actual bill says repeal Proposition 209. What's Proposition 209? And that is a very fair and logical question to ask. So let's look up Proposition 209, because obviously it's probably something racist, right? So California Proposition 209er. Ladies and gentlemen, California Proposition 209. also known as the California Civil Rights Initiative, is a California ballot proposition which, upon approval in November of 1996, amended the state constitution to prohibit state governmental institutions from considering race, sex, or ethnicity, specifically in areas of public employment, public contracting, and public education. Proposition 209, also known as the California Civil Rights Initiative. So, and again, that's why they obfuscate it. That's why it's called California Proposition 16, repeal Proposition 209. Because they can't say, hey, we want to get rid of the California Civil Rights Initiative. Because at this point, they have to know that most people are, I'll have to say it, are stupid and will just go along with something they don't understand, as long as it has a nice headline, which it does. Because if they just left it at Proposition 16, repeal Proposition 209, I think the majority of the people, whether they were lazy or not, would say, well, what's Proposition 209? So in order to thwart that instinct, we call it the Affirmative Action Amendment. Okay, got it. So reading it once again, Proposition 209, also known as the California Civil Rights Initiative, or CCRI, is a California ballot proposition which, upon approval in 1996, amended the state constitution to prohibit, to not allow, state government institutions from considering race, sex, or ethnicity, specifically in areas of public employment, public contracting, and public education. Sounds, yes, that's what we want. We don't want you to be able to discriminate against people's race, sex, or ethnicity when figuring out who you're going to hire. Right? We don't want that. I thought that's what the whole, we had a whole civil rights movement about that. Content of your heart, your character, not the color of your skin, that whole thing. Martin Luther King. But that is actually on the ballot now in California. A vote yes supports the constitutional amendment to repeal Proposition 209, 1996. And I'm seeing these politicians I'm seeing these politicians saying that the Klan, only a racist would vote no on this. And it is very discouraging. It is very discouraging that you are going to repeal this civil rights legislation in the name of affirmative action. Right? Because some of these people have actually read this. And I'll have to go back to, I forget what website that was. I think it might have been The Hill. I don't know. But you see these people saying, yeah, we want to repeal that. That way, these schools can get more, because of course, we're all referred to in just a giant trash pile of non-whites. People of color, we can get persons of color in school. If we repeal this, we can get more persons of color in these specific jobs. Okay. But you can also say, hey, whites only. Hey, Mexicans only. Hey, blacks only. So the level of short-sightedness to anyone who would support this, and I fully expect this to get passed because I have very little faith in California at this point, and because I honestly believe that the more radical elements of the leftists are actual racist people. That reminds me of a tweet from Richard Spencer after he endorsed Joe Biden. Richard Spencer being probably one of the more infamous. I don't know if he's a white supremacist per se. I know he's definitely a white nationalist, a white separatist. So I think it's fair to assume he's a white supremacist. But anyway, when he was disavowing Donald Trump and saying the whole MAGA thing failed, his last statement, and I'm paraphrasing, was we have to, don't worry, we'll have our day in the sun again. We have to step away and come back in a different form. basically changed their tactics, right? And if you're reading that after you hear him disavow Trump and support Biden, it's not that hard to follow those breadcrumbs. Okay, we just got to get rid of the right and support the left. And what you have in California is a law that is on the ballot today that could make discrimination legal. And again, they're doing it foolishly, and it reminds me of that saying that the road to hell is paved with the best intentions. They're doing it with the best intentions, right? Purportedly, that and this is me trying to argue in good faith, assuming that they're doing it for the right reasons in their minds. That okay, we need more ethnic representation in this and this and that, or we need more women in this or that, or whatever it is. Okay, but at the same time, you know, it's kind of the same short-sightedness they have in understanding the First Amendment. Yes, you have the right to protest. I also have the right to say fuck you. So, that to me makes as much sense as if they came out with a anti-female abuse act. Right? Imagine they pass they propose an anti-female abuse act, and that allows adults to assault each other free of criminal charge, and is done in the spirit of punishing domestic abusers. Right? It's done to punish people that beat on their wives. You can just beat each other up, and it's fine. It's the Anti-Female Abuse Act. Okay, good. So yeah, if I catch my neighbor throwing his old lady a beating, I can go over there and intervene. Or if I know somebody who's done that, I can go get him. Right? But by the letter of the law, guess what I can also do? I can throw my old lady a beating. Dinner wasn't on the table, tiger uppercut. So that to me, and again, from the standpoint of the actual provisions of the law, while they can support the title of the law, they can also work diametrically opposed to the title of the law. Again, the Affirmative Action Amendment. We're going to do this so we can hire more people of color in these jobs. Yes, but guess what you can also do? You can also say, don't want any of them. So it just seems that we should just kind of leave it all out of the picture and go by, I don't know, qualifications. But anyway, man, I'll be watching that today because, when you add that onto the pile of infringements, the left is really flirting with segregation, like pretty hardcore. You had the thing in Dearborn, Michigan, where they had the segregated student cafes. Then you had some kind of federal training for employees or some kind of library in Oregon. I'll have to look it up. I'll throw that link. I'll throw both of those links in the description as well. But you had a library in Oregon that had segregated training for people. And it's like, the left is really starting to beat the drum of segregation again. Let's not forget who it was that implemented it in the first place. It was the Democrats. Yeah, they called themselves the Dixiecrats back then. Yep, Jim Crow, all of that. So anyway, that's what I got for you today, man, on this Election Day special. Hopefully, well, we won't know. We won't know, actually. We won't know. I won't be able to come on tomorrow and say, right? Because now you can't say anything because, Donald Trump, according to the media, more leftist framing. Here we go. I'll leave you with this one. Donald Trump is undermining the electoral process. Donald Trump is eroding Americans' faith in the elections. How many have heard that? Okay, who was it that proposed mass mail-in voting? And then in the 11th hour said, wait a minute, no, we're not going to do this anymore. Who was it that my mother contacted me this week and said I had a ballot, a voting ballot, an absentee ballot or whatever it was, but it was a voting ballot sent to her house in New Jersey. I have not lived in New Jersey in almost 10 years. So whose idea was this? But Donald Trump's undermining it. Got it. To the point where this is actually the first election night where at the end of the night we won't know who's president. Who brought that on? Anyway, I hope everybody has a good day. I hope everybody stays safe. I hope America just takes a chill pill. And most importantly, I hope Trump wins. Until tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen. Peace.